Afternoon all, and welcome to Live Work Life Training Academy on training, interviewing candidates face-to-face or potentially virtually. As everyone's starting to log in, it's good to see the numbers creeping up. Can people just drop a very quick either question and answer or something in the Zoom chat to say that you can actually hear me, which would be very much appreciated. I hope everyone's had a good start to their day and having a really good sort of a Hump Wednesday. People are still filing in, which is really good to see. Thank you, Ruth. Excellent to see you can hear me. That's really, really good. Catherine, Siobhan. That's good. Jacqueline. Sarah. Sadie. Gentlemen, it looks like all the ladies are saying they can hear me. Obviously, the gentlemen can't. Sachin, good man. Sachin can hear us as well. So I'd like to welcome everyone today. We've got lots of people on the webinar again today, which is really good. Sort of quick rundown of the people that are here. We've got Connections Recruit, Impact, TNN, Eventus Legal, Westray, Ignata, JobWise, G2 Group, Advantage Resourcing, Amicus, Hall Recruitment, Recce, Premier Group, SL Solutions, Obscurant, Athwell Resourcing, Cherry Professional, Pivotal, CKG Search, TTS 24/7, Cooper Lomax, Truly Tailored, Starred, and lots of people who are logging in through their Hotmail, through their Outlook, etc. So I'm assuming and hoping that all you guys are on furlough and you're well. If you're working, congratulations. What I'd like to do is first of all start this off in a very normal manner. This is interviewing candidates. You know, the marketplace isn't really going to change that much to a certain degree when we start to interview candidates. But how we interview candidates is going to change hugely. And what we've got to start to do is think about what that is going to actually mean to all of us with regards to how we are perceived by our candidates, how we're perceived by our clients, and how we can actually get ourselves ahead of the game when we come to interviewing candidates. And I think there's lots of tips to be learned from the old ways and lots of tips to learn from what we're going to do later on. So what we've got to start to think about is interviewing candidates face-to-face. And as before, interviewing candidates face-to-face was always out in front of them. Now we can do that virtually. So there's now going to be a real big change in what we do. So this course, I want to cover the very basics of, if my screen will change, there you go, the very basics of why face-to-face interviewing is better, irrespective whether it be face-to-face or via the video, than phone interviewing, pre-screening and what you want, interviewing preparation itself, structure, taking control, can they and will they, other questions we need to ask, competency-based interviewing, STAR technique, closing with actions, maintaining control, and testing commitment. So we've got a lot to run through in an hour. It's normally round about a 3-hour course is this, and sometimes I push it into a full day course with lots of role plays. So we're going to try go very, very quickly. If you have any questions, please fire those questions through on the chat or on the question and answer box. Okay, I will try answer those questions, but as I say, it's normally on a Wednesday, I'm normally on my own. So I'll be reading through going through the PowerPoint, but also what I'll be doing is looking at the questions and answers from there. So let's kick off with that from there. So face-to-face interviewing. It's really important when we start to look at face-to-face interviewing is what would you rather get or what would you rather have from a candidate? So why face-to-face interview rather than over the phone? The difference between those that really excel at recruitment and those that give great customer service and truly understand their market, it all starts with interviewing candidates face-to-face. If you get out in front of your marketplace and really understand your marketplace, therefore, you can sell your marketplace so much better. Perception of what you and your business are actually born at this very moment in time. The biggest critics that we have in the recruitment market are our candidates. So if we want to really squash the candidate critics, we've got to give them a better service. So the question isn't just about why is face-to-face interviewing better. The question is all about value. Value in the eyes of our market's biggest critics. values in the eyes of our candidates, because it's our candidates that make us money. And we start to think about that in true light. Clients can give you lots and lots of jobs, and you can have as many jobs on as you like from a client. If you haven't got a candidate to fill those jobs, then the jobs aren't going to yield revenue. So our candidates are really our biggest critics in the marketplace, because it's our candidates that truly enable us to invoice clients and clients to pay us. So they are our biggest critics, and therefore we've got to work our way to make sure that our customer service is absolutely top notch, and therefore our perception will change within the marketplace if we do the right things. So there we go, it's starting to move. So why is it important for face-to-face interviewing? What should we be looking for when we undertake a face-to-face interview? Face-to-face interviewing gives you lots of different things, and I always think the things that I will look for when I start to do proper face-to-face interviewing is I want to build a good, strong relationship and rapport with my candidate. The more rapport I build with my candidate, the easier it is to take control with the candidate and gain a fuller understanding of what the marketplace is actually all about. What I truly need to understand from my interview is, can they and will they be able to do the role that I'm putting forward? I've got to really work hard on can they and will they. And I have to have 100% compliance in both those questions, can they and will they, before I even start about thinking, putting my candidate forward for a job. So the interview process wants to identify absolutely those two things 100%. You'll be able to probe your candidate in a far better way in a face-to-face interview, because you can actually see their facial reactions and their body language. And we remember Morabian said that body language is 55% of all communication. So we can actually see what they're actually looking like and what their body language is like. We can see how well engaged they are within the recruitment process, but also how engaged they are within the actual job that we want to put them forward to. So it's important when we first of all interview a candidate, irrespective of whether we have a job or not, that if we can see them and properly engage from a facial point of view and from a physical point of view, we can get to understand whether they are truly engaging with us or not. The next thing I want to sort of look at, that sort of I go through that, is I want to assess how the candidate interviews. I want to assess how they react during the interview, because I want to assess their dress sense, their body language, how they answer questions. And I'm sure we've all got, and I'm going to go into a few later on, I'm sure we've got sort of lots of stories about dress sense. We've got lots of stories about body language that candidates have done during interview, that if we'd have interviewed the candidate face to face, we may have been able to see that and maybe coach them in a certain way to help them pass that interview. I want to evaluate their honesty and integrity. And I think in this marketplace, honesty and integrity becomes really, really a high value point, especially when we start putting candidates forward to clients. We don't want candidates dropping out. We want to understand that they're going to follow the process all the way through. I also want to create an alliance with my candidates. The start of marketing your services to candidates starts here. I always say that the best form of marketing is word of mouth. And if you give a candidate a really good service, you really look after them, whether you place them or not, their word of mouth marketing is paramountly important for the client site that they're on, where they are currently, and one where they may go to, because they'll be telling other candidates about you. They may be telling their client about you as well. So therefore, that word of mouth is really important. So if you want to create a really good strategic alliance with the candidate, you have to treat them well during this process. You've got to demonstrate your capabilities and your market knowledge. You've got to demonstrate that you understand what the market is like and what the market is actually doing. You've got to demonstrate why you're going to be of benefit to them. Because if you can't demonstrate why you're going to be of benefit to them, then you can't really create a relationship with them. If you can't create a relationship with them, for them, it's easy for them to drop out of the recruitment process. It's easy for them to start ignoring your calls. But the more they engage with you and the more sticky you get with them, the more you'll be able to manipulate the situation and take control, and therefore negate the dropouts that you may have. You may want to spin a candidate into a client, and you may want to look for exclusivity with a client. But when I look at interviewing face-to-face, to me, these are the reasons why I do a face-to-face interview rather than do just a basic telephone interview. So, as we move forward, pre-screening candidates, again, is really important. So I always speak to clients when I go and speak to clients first and foremost when I'm doing a really good understanding of their business. I want to understand how they interact with their marketplace. So I always ask, who's pre-screen candidates? And I always get a lot of questions go, well, we don't really pre-screen a candidate. We either get them to do a telephone interview or we do a face-to-face interview. We don't really do a pre-screen. However, a pre-screen, proper pre-screen, will save you time and money in the long run, because it will identify whether you actually want to take the candidate further forward in the recruitment process, or whether or not you want to reject them at that moment in time, therefore saving your time as a consultant from doing a face-to-face interview. Because after all, face-to-face interviewing, whether it be face-to-face or over video, is a really expensive piece of time, and it's also about opportunity lost. So if we make sure that we're face-to-facing candidates properly, we need to do a pre-screen. Now, depending on the size of your business and your type of business, how we pre-screen a candidate, again, can start to create interest and desire in the candidate. So the pre-screen I would normally do, if you think about a headhunting service, they'll have a researcher come on and do a pre-screen with a candidate before it gets to the headhunter. Again, it's about creating value. It's about creating an opportunity for the candidate. It's about the candidate feeling valued by the company. So if you have other people doing your pre-screening for you and a proper pre-screening interview, all of a sudden it starts to increase the desire of the candidate to work with you and talk with you about the roles that you potentially have on. Therefore, you can start to manipulate the situation with what's going on. But it also means that you are then only engaging with the candidates that you truly want to engage with. If you are a one-person business or a small business, obviously you may have to do your own pre-screen, but you may want to think about taking the pre-screen and then say, okay, that's a really good information that I've now gathered, and I'll talk about the information in a minute, and then want to move that onto a full-blown face-to-face interview before I put you forward to my client, because I want to understand more about you. So it's a great opportunity to really, I suppose, look at your marketplace and vet your marketplace before you truly engage in a full interview process. So, the pre-screen interview. What is it we should be looking for and asking the candidate in the pre-screen interview? Your aim is to identify a candidate that is actually worth bringing in for a formal interview. So this is the basic interview that should identify the pure, unadulterated facts. Can they and will they be able to do the position? Are they good enough to add to your candidate pool? Because remember, opportunity is cost. If you spend time bringing candidates in for face-to-face interviews, and those face-to-face interviews should take an hour plus, that's a lot of money lost when you could be doing more more things that are more advantageous to you, because bringing a candidate in that is not right for your job wastes your time and the candidate time and doesn't reflect on them. So what I want to look at is, when I look at the pre-screen interview, I want to look at certain things. I want to know why they're looking for a role. I want to know what sort of role they're actually looking for. I want to know what their plan is to find a role. And I want to know how far that plan they are down already, whether they've got other things on the go. I want to know what sort of salary they're looking for, and I want to know what their current salary is. I want to know what their ideal role would look like, and I want to certainly know what their notice period looks like. I want to confirm with them here and now what their availability is for interview. And the big thing that I want to look for is what their reason is for leaving. I want to know why they're looking to leave. I want to create desire, and I want to look at that. Service is now more important than ever, and it's going to be a key selling point. So this is going to be the front line now of recruitment. How we interview candidates and how you invest in the interview process will reflect on your agency standing in the marketplace. But it will also tell other people within the marketplace what people think of you. So the candidate that can add quality to your database, irrespective of whether you have a job for them at the moment, also might be right for interviewing. We've got to start to think about growing our marketplace and growing our reach within the marketplace, for when clients come to us, we have the right candidates there and then. We need to negate what our market actually looks like. If you look at our market at one end where clients think we are all cowboys, and at the other end they all think that we are very, very professional, there's a bit of sort of run between that, from a cowboy, a money-centric recruiter, to an okay recruiter, to a caring recruiter, to a nurturing recruiter, to a professional standards recruiter, etc. And our candidates are out there every day telling other candidates and clients exactly what they feel of each other or each agency and what sort of experience they've had with those agencies. Therefore, for you, it's important that your interview process reflects your agency standards. It isn't just a slapdash single process. So we need to prepare before we meet the candidate, especially with meeting the candidate face-to-face or over video. So what do you actually need to prepare before you bring a candidate either into a face-to-face interview, whether that be in your office or whether that be in a hotel or a pub, wherever it be? We need to make sure that we are actually doing things that are bringing us further forward in the marketplace. And I always say, if we prepare now, we're in a far better position to actually interview the candidate properly. So you need to ensure your interview room is clean and tidy. Now, the interview room in an office, should be clean and tidy. If you're meeting a candidate off-site, you've got to think, is that off-site environment conducive to an interview, especially if social distancing carries on, but we're still allowed to now then go to work. We may have to be in a place where we may be sat quite some distance away, so who can hear our conversations? If we're going to do video interviewing, whether you're doing interviewing from home, or whether you're doing interviewing from within an office space, you've got to start to think about the noise around that interview. You've got to start to think about the background of that interview. You've got to start to think about how that would come across to the candidate. Does it come across as a professional interview environment or not? So setting them up is really important. It also helps you to start to focus on what's going on. If they're coming into the office, inform if you have a receptionist that they're coming in. If it's an open office and people just walk into that office, make sure the people nearest the door know that people are coming in at this time for an interview so they can actually greet them straight away. If you're interviewing from home, inform your household that you're actually having an interview. There's nothing worse than the kids coming across, the husband, the missus coming across, and going across your background or shouting in the background. So inform everybody that you are having an interview. You need to set goals for your interview. It's really important that you set goals of what you want to get from the interview for you and for the candidate. So you need to sort of preempt what the candidate goals may be. So you know the sort of questions they're likely to ask, so you have answers for them already. And I've already fully reviewed the candidate's CV. Too often I see recruiters going in to meet a candidate, they sit down, they pull a CV out and they start reading the CV, and they don't really know a great deal about the candidate because they haven't sort of spent some time to actually really understand the CV and what's going on within the CV. So we need to have predefined questions, and your predefined questions will come from the knowledge that you've gained from reviewing that CV straight away, because you're going to be looking for strengths and weaknesses to highlight and address, and you're going to highlight any potential errors that may be in the CV. You need to make sure that you're suitably dressed. Even over video, how you're dressed is really important. And I think I said this on last week's webinar. I can't remember if it was Tuesday's or Wednesday's webinar. I did a webinar with a client with 3 different people within the client from there on doing various training sessions with them. And one of them was blatantly sat in bed with the laptop on their lap, taking a business training session. And to me that just shows lack of professionalism, lack of understanding of what we're actually talking about. So you need to be dressed suitably, as well as your environment needs to be conducive to actually undertaking the interview process itself. You need to have more than one role to discuss. Now, in this marketplace, that might be a little bit difficult. If you haven't got one more role to discuss, have clients to discuss that you know what's going on with those clients. The more knowledge you can give your candidate about the marketplace, the more they're likely to want to only come to you and talk to you from there. So having a list of potential clients who match their skills and know those clients so you can talk to them about those clients are really important. This is all pre-interview stage, that you have to have this information. So you've got to work really hard before we get to that interview stage to make sure that you are fully ginned up on the candidate and your marketplace. So important first contact. So it's important that your first impression counts. You know, after all, this is not a client site. This is an interview where a candidate's coming to see you, and you are evaluating whether that candidate is right for, well, right for you to represent and move into the other into roles further down the recruitment process. So first impressions last. And if the candidate's coming to meet you to discuss how you can help them in their quest to find a job, you need to prepare for that. But those first impressions as they walk through the door in your agency, or you open the video and all of a sudden they come onto the video, all of those things have a ripple effect. We all know that, you know, those first 30 seconds are so important. So what do they think about you? What do they think about what's going on? And I can tell lots of different stories about first impressions of meeting candidates and meeting clients, and how they manifest themselves in various different things, and how you want to sort of deal with them. I met one candidate, and this is a true story. I met one candidate. He walked up, and before he shook my hand, he pulled a handkerchief out of his pocket, blew his nose, then put 2 of his fingers in the handkerchief, put the fingers up his nose, cleaned his nostrils out, put the hanky inside his pocket, and then went to shake my hand. You can guarantee it wasn't the firmest handshake I wanted to do ever, or carry on further. My first impression was, what a horrible person. You know, yes, he was blowing a nose, and that had been quite, but the second part was just untoward. And so all these little things have a knock-on effect on how you feel about people and how they feel about you. So we've got to make sure that we do the right things. So first impressions count. What I always look for is make sure that I want to prepare myself. Okay, so I'm going to prepare myself for the interview. I see, again, lots of consultants go into interviews in person, but in mind, they're not there. They're not mentally prepared for the interview. So we need to make sure that we are mentally prepared for what's going on. Again, as I said, if the candidate is coming into your office, inform your reception desk who's coming in and why they're coming in, and get them to greet them. Get them to come and find you and introduce them to you. Again, that one step up, you're introducing somebody to somebody else, okay? And it just becomes a nice little smooth operation. Remember, if you're interviewing by video, that first opening of the video is really important. So it's important that you are there on time. It's important that everything is set up before the candidate actually gets onto that interview process or into the video process. You make sure that you are there. And as I said, the things that you need to sort of pick up on is your background, etc. Make sure that you are in full view on the video. You're not just a very small pinprick in the video and you're hiding away somewhere like this under the thing. You are absolutely up front and center in the video framing. But the big thing to make sure that you have right on that video is your audio. If your audio is really, really good and clear, it's so much easier to have an interview. If your interview is really muffled and your audio is really muffled, you'll miss lots of things that the candidate is saying to you. So you need to make sure your audio and your video is absolutely up to date from there. If they're coming into the office or you're meeting them out somewhere, ask if they'd like a drink. If you're doing it over video, ask them if they have a drink ready. If they haven't got a drink ready, ask them if they'd like to get a drink ready, and explain, because it's going to take some time to do the interview properly to ensure that you can represent them properly. Don't get them onto an interview and expect them to be there for an hour, maybe longer, if they haven't got a drink, because they'll start to wander a little bit. So you need to make sure that they feel comfortable from there. If you have to walk to an interview, we all know about icebreaker questions and using those icebreaker questions, but these things still need to happen when we're having a video interview. And that's going to be slightly different because you haven't got that pause between sort of walking from one room to another room, etc., to have an interview. You've got to make sure you have that information there and then, and what you're going to talk about. It has to look genuine, not just small talk for the need of making small talk. But you also have to be able to work a transition between that icebreaker into the proper interview stage itself. Also, if you've asked them to bring any necessary paperwork and documentation, this still needs checking even whether you're doing a video interview or a face-to-face interview, you need to check that you have the right documentation there and then before you move forward. There's no point, again, going through a whole interview if you suddenly find the documents that they have means that they are prohibited from working or can't work, or they're not right for the role that you're working for. So always check that documentation. You can then move to different areas if you're required from there. So we started to think about setting up the interview, and we're setting up the interview process. So whether face-to-face, over the phone, we've got to think about what produces better results. Interview over the telephone are great because you can actually pre-screen the candidate, and you can pre-screen it based on skills, and you have to have a really good feeling about them before you put them forward. However, I always feel when I do a face-to-face interview, I don't really get that touchy-feely, really good feeling of a candidate because I haven't met them. I haven't looked them in the whites of the eyes. So I need to make sure that my recruitment process is a high touch point and high quality service. It's important that I know my product inside out because I'm going to sell that product to the client. You've also got to remember that clients will ask, probably most of their candidates, have they met their recruiter? Yes, I've had a telephone interview, but yes, I've met my recruiter. They came to see me, or I've been into their office. We spent an hour and a half. We've talked a lot about your business, etc. Is a far better answer than them just skimming over, oh, I had a 20-minute telephone interview from there. So we've got to really make sure that we differentiate our service, because video interviewing, etc. now, everyone's going to have that. So again, it boils back to service with the candidate and how the candidate feels all the way through that service. So if we look at interviewing, stats have proved that a higher percentage of clients take candidates on who have been face-to-face interviewed rather than just telephone interviewed, because the agency usually has a better understanding of the candidate. So to get your candidate interview to placement ratios up, the more you face-to-face interview your candidates, the better that ratio will improve and the more placements that you will make. So moving forward from there, what does your current recruitment structure look like? And this is another thing that I sometimes find when I start to go into recruitment agencies. I start to look at their recruitment structure, and they have a very loose structure. It doesn't really benefit the consultant or the candidate. It gets them the basic information, but what it doesn't get is the information that is truly required that makes a difference between an okay recruiter and a brilliant recruiter. So structure is really important. So I always like to stick to a structure constantly to make sure that the structure that I get when I'm doing a face-to-face or a video interview is always the same. It means I get the right information constantly. So I always put my structure in order, because if it's in order, then I can always go back if I miss anything. So I always want a really good introduction. I want to know about the candidate's personal background. I want to know what the candidate, what does the candidate's ideal role look like? I want to know the candidate's reasons for leaving. Once I know those type of information, and that's the basic information we could have got from a pre-screen, but we can also move these forward, I want to make sure that I then start to look at the CV itself. So I'm going to probe into the CV. I want a good introduction. I want to gather that strong personal history of the candidate, because that helps put the candidate at ease and shapes the questions later. But also when I'm going through that pre-screening interview, the information that I've already got, when I start going into the CV, I now can start to bring rapport, because I can now start saying, you said on the last interview this, this, and this. Can you expand that a little bit more? Can you tell me more about that? So I'm now bringing more information out of the candidate than I got before. I want to look at review their achievements are, because I want to see what they've done and what they've achieved, because those type of things I can now start to sell back to the client of a reason why you should be interviewing this person. Then I'll start to move on to the competency-based questions to ensure that these questions identify that the candidate can and will do the job, and they have the necessary skills to do the job. I want to make sure that I'm really pushing hard to review and establish the candidate's needs and wishes before I move forward. If I start to look at this now, once I've interviewed the candidate properly, I've got to start thinking long-term rather than short-term. Long-term is I want the client to interview this candidate. In this day and age now, just sending over a CV isn't good enough. So if I've done and set my interview process up properly, at the end of this process, I should be able to guide the candidate now through, say, a 2-minute elevator pitch that we could record, which I could then send to the client as a video. So I need to make sure that when I get to the end of this process and I can close the process, that I know I've got the right candidate, not on paper, on video, or face-to-face, that when they meet the client, they will get further down the interview process than before. So there's a lot of things that go into this before I even start to actually put the candidate through any questions. And all of these things have been going on constantly and should be going on constantly to make sure your interview process maximizes the time that you spend with your client rather than minimizes the time and wastes time for you. So the candidate's now settled into the interview room, or they're on your video. You've broken the ice. Now you need to actually set the interview up. And how you start the interview is really important. Your introduction needs to be really strong. And the reason why I say your introduction needs to be really strong, what a lot of consultants tend to forget is the candidate may have spoke to you over the phone. They may have spoke to somebody else over the phone. You're meeting them for the first time, either face-to-face or via video. So covering what actually happens or what's going to happen in the interview is really important. If you're setting objectives down straight away of what's going to happen in the interview, then the candidate already understands what's actually going to happen to them and how they need to perform during this interview. So you need to tell them what your job actually is and what you do, what success you've had, and what your aims of the interview are going to be. Quite often, this is missed out. And quite often, candidates are sitting in long interviews wondering what's actually going on. You need to tell them what the potential outcomes are likely to be from the interview. Once you start to do this, what you need to start to take is control and keep it. You want to identify everything before we start. So once we start the interview process, we now start moving down. When we start moving down the process and conducting the interview, the first area I start to address is the will they be able to do the job. Can they and will they are the two most important things you need to establish during the interview process. As I said earlier, you must have 100% compliancy on both, otherwise the candidate's not right to put forward. You need to understand if technically they are able to do the role, and then you need to fully establish if they will do the role. And I always go will first. To find out these things, you need to be probing deeply into the candidate's past, skills, reasons for leaving, their motivators, etc. You can't afford to miss anything. So these are the questions that I tend to ask, and these are the base questions. They always lead to more questions when I start to move forward. So I want to know from the candidate what's made them start looking for a new position, how long they've been looking for a new position, what has happened up until now. Does their employer know they're on the marketplace? Do they have any interviews lined up? What are their reasons for leaving? Does their spouse or partner know they are looking to move? And that is a really, real big deal killer in my experience. Too many times I've seen people go, yeah, I'll accept it. They've accepted the job on the Friday. Come Monday, they come back and say, I'm really sorry. My partner said, I can't accept that job for whatever reason, because they've never discussed it. So it's worth discussing now, the first very call you have. What are their salary expectations? And I've written here, love, intend, and must. I always say that salaries are all about going out on a limb. And if you go out on a limb with your candidate, you may get the right salary for your candidate. So love is what they'd love to get. Intend is what they intend to get. A must is what the lowest figure they must have. If you know you've got a candidate that will accept on the must, and we discussed this during the negotiation course, if you know that you've got a candidate that will accept on the must and the client is willing to offer the must or less than their must, you know you've got an offer. If you can then drive that up, then you know you're going a great place. If you've got a client that's willing to offer more than that, you've got a great place to be. So we've got to make sure that we understand what their salary expectations are from there. So love, intent, must is really important. So remember, if your client is willing to offer massively more, then you're in a really good position. If your client is offering just on that must line and your candidate will accept, you're in a good position. But knowing that right from day one is really important. Having a candidate go in that's salary is way too high, again, makes you look stupid to the client and stupid to the candidate. You need to make sure you set your expectations right from day one. You need to explain what is the triggered their decision to leave. We need to understand why they're going to leave, because if there's going to be a counter offer, we need to be able to understand what that counter offer is actually going to be. So we need to understand that if they're going to have a counter offer, what has happened in the past. And I always ask, if someone else has left the business, what has your boss done? Have they counter offered? Have they just accepted it, let them work their notice? Have they put them on garden leave? What has happened? So I want to know instantly what that counter offer is going to look like from my client. Once I start to establish that, I then move on to the second phase. I want to know on, can they? So I want them to walk me through their background. I want them to talk me through their background. What are your key skills is a key question. How long have you worked for your current employer? What is it you like working for your employer? What has been your key achievements? How many people are in your team? And I want to know whether that's split between contract and perm, so it's a cross-sell opportunity. How many people work in your team? What qualifications do you have? If I spoke to your manager, what they say about you? Where are you in your current position located, as in grade, etc.? And what notice period have you have? These are all very basic questions, and they give me lots of basic information. Because remember, I want to establish whether they can and will do the job. Once I start to get this, can they do the job, which is the technical side, I can then start to think about this person's worth going on with this interview and pushing into a competency-based interview. These questions can be asked as part of the pre-screen, and some of them are asked as part of this pre-screen, but now we're going to start to evaluate these even more. And I often talk to candidates and consultants, and when I'm talking to candidates, I'm listening to what they're saying, and I'm listening to how they're asking answering the consultant's questions. I then start to listen to the questions that the consultant is asking, and I can start to see the disconnect between the two. And what I start to see is how recruiters have become adept at asking surface questions, getting a surface answer, and then not probing anymore. And so the most important question I will ever say during an interview to a candidate is simply, tell me more. Talk to me through your background, Mr. Candidate, and the candidate will give me lots of information about their background. Simple. That sounds really interesting. Tell me more. That tell me more opens them up to give me more information about what they've been doing. Talk to me about your biggest achievement at in your current client. Oh, I did this, this, and this. That sounds really interesting. Tell me more. That tell me more means they have to expand. They have to give you more information. The more information you have, the easier it is for you to start to sell the candidate into the client. The easier it is for you to now start to establish a pattern within the candidate. Can they actually do the job? And that's a real interesting question, because they can give you a surface answer. And if you leave it at the surface answer, I can guarantee your client will probe deeper. And if he probes deeper by one question and can find they cannot do the job, then it's you that looks stupid. So we've got to make sure that we are probing deeper constantly through the process and working there. So other questions we need to ask before we move on to the competency-based interview questions are very simple. You need to look at gaps in their work and ask why they have gaps in their work. What have they been doing? What do they do? If they've got short jobs, Why? If it's a contractor, and I always say, irrespective of whether it's a contract or perm, you should do the same recruitment process. And a lot of contract consultants kick back and say, I haven't got the time to spend an hour with a candidate, etc., etc. Well, I kick back and say, I built a £750,000 contract book doing exactly this, purely because I wanted to know my candidate inside out, because I want to know when I put them on a client site, how long they would stay on that client site and whether they were the right person for that client. So I want to understand if they've got short-term contracts, why they were short-term contracts, why they've never extended, what's going on. If it's a short-term perm job, why is it a short-term perm job? What is the reasons that happen there? I want to know what relevant training they've had, relevant to the job in hand, but also relevant that maybe take them to an extra place. Have they got training that goes beyond their job that may enhance the client's skill set already on site? Anything that feels not right, I want to probe. Everyone in recruitment always says we develop that sixth sense, that little gut feeling that something's not quite right, and it chips away at you. And how often do we actually ignore that gut feeling and still put the candidate forward? The candidate gets the interview, and then the client comes back and says, he's not quite right, or she's not quite right because of this or because of that. And you go, I had a feeling like that. Well, if you've got that feeling, you need to probe it now during the interview. You need to understand why, because you need to be able to make a decision at the end of the interview whether you put that candidate forward or not. If you put them forward and you have that niggling little doubt inside you, then I can tell you now that will come back and manifest itself in a no, and again, degrade your capabilities in the client's eyes. So we need to understand the soft skills and develop them. Teamwork, leadership, etc. What do they look like? And then, once we've got all that type of information, we need to move on to competency-based questioning. Competency-based questioning is very different to just that normal first half of the interview that I've just gone through. That first half of the interview is establishing can they and will they. I now need to look for true evidence of whether they can and they will. So what questions you can ask now that gather evidence can prove that the candidate can do the role is really important. So we need to make sure that we're asking questions that really now identify series of events that the candidate can prove that they have reoccurring competencies, not just surface competencies, to do the job. The reoccurring competencies that I constantly use are these. I use what's called the STAR technique. I'm sure people have heard across the STAR technique, but this is what I use. So I'm going to very quickly go through the STAR technique and tell you how the STAR technique works. STAR stands for situation, task, action, and results. So once I've gone through that first set of questions, I'll have identified certain things that I want to probe into with my candidate on a competency-based interview. So I'll start to identify the situation. And I always have big open-ended questions here. Tell me about, give me an example of, describe a time when you were, etc. And you should be looking for really interesting things for them to tell you. And we should be looking at things at how we can expand. That's really good. Can you tell me more about this? When we get into that competency-based questioning technique, it shouldn't feel like an interrogation. It should feel like a real interest to gain more knowledge about what the candidate actually does. So we need to expand all the time. So that first situation is really important. Give me an example of when you have done whatever it is the client is looking for. Describe a time when you have been, etc. if the client's looking for those type of things. So we're going to really get the situation out there. Once we get the situation out there, we start to look for the task. The task is very straightforward. Now you know the situation, you need to understand the tasks that the candidate took during the process. And here is when we start to listen really carefully to what the candidate actually is saying to you. You need to be clear. You are gathering evidence on the candidate, not on someone else. So listen to what the candidate's saying. This is a task I'm involved in. We did this, or I did this. The team did this. I did this. If you start to hear lots of we's, the team, the company, what that's actually telling you is that the candidate didn't do all of that process. They were maybe a small part of that process. If you start to hear I all the time, then what you're seeing is the person that is what they did. So the task is all about the candidate's interaction, with the situation. What were your plans? What were your objectives? What tasks did you have to do? How were you involved? And it's all about them. It's not about their team. Yes, we can start to ask about the team, but we need to establish from the candidate just what they were trying to achieve from the situation and the task. I need to understand and match that scenario back all the way through. So it's important that we push really hard on the task because it will identify what was actually happening there. And that leads us on to the third part of the STAR. The third part is very simple, the actions. Now you know the situation your candidate had to outline. You know their involvement in the tasks. Now we're going to probe for specific actions to see what evidence the candidate actually did. So what actions did you undertake? Who else was involved? Who took the lead? What issues did you have to overcome? How did you do that? What else did you do? How were others involved? All these type of questions identify the candidate's actual interaction within that. So we're now getting a really good rounded understanding of what's going on. And it could be that in all competency-based interviewing questions, you ask one question about a certain topic, you then ask another question about another topic, and then you come back and ask a similar question about the first topic. And you keep going backwards and forwards. And what we're constantly looking for is we're looking for different situations, different tasks, different actions all the way through. Because what we want to establish is that the candidate has a reoccurring skill set, not that the candidate has done it once and only once. So how do they do those type of things? So you'll have the technical skills that they'll be doing with their client, but what about the soft skills, the management skills, or the people skills? They could come from anywhere, inside of work and outside of work. So again, we're looking for competencies that match our client's requirements, and we're now looking for evidence that we can take back and say, this is quantifiable evidence of what the candidate's actually done, so we can sell that to the client. The last thing of the STAR, and this is the thing that is often missed, and again, when I'm listening to candidates on site, consultants on site, talking to candidates, I hear them go through a basic competency-based questions, but don't really probe deep enough. I then never generally hear this part, and never generally hear about the results. What results? What was the result? What would change if you did it again? What did you learn? And I want to know those three things. What was the result? What would you change? And what did you learn? I want to know whether it's good, bad, or indifferent results, what actually happened, because it demonstrates how well they proceeded through that project, how well they did through that competency. If they've only got one competency and they can't give you another one, it shows that they're not particularly adapt to the job that you're putting forward them. But if they've got 3 or 4 competencies, it's starting to show that they are right for you. So you need to ask for similar situations, and we need to push down that all the time. The more your consultants gather material that match the job specification, the more you can actually sell your candidate with confidence to your client. When we now talk about selling our candidate now over video to our client, once we've now highlighted these competencies and we understand which key competencies actually fit within the client's remit, now we can start to get a 2-minute video of those competencies and how they match the client's skill set with the candidate, which is far more powerful than you selling to the candidate, or even, to the client, or even worse still, you just sending a CV and hoping the client spots it in the CV of the competencies. So it's now important that we use the competency-based interviewing to create a video CV and drive that video CV into the client. Once we have the right things, we need to close. We need to close with actions. And I think it's really important, again, when we're talking to a candidate, this is the first time the candidate truly met us. And so we need to set expectations right from day one of what's actually going to happen. So we need to make sure we have facts to sell to our client. If we haven't got facts to sell to our client, then why will our client interview the candidate? We need to create trust with our candidate. Do I trust this candidate's going to go all the way through the recruitment process? And if they get to the end of the process, will they accept the job? So can they and will they be able to do the job? I need to make 100% certain that that is absolutely true. So the trust becomes a real big driver when I'm interviewing a candidate. I look for leads and references constantly. I then start to look for exclusivity with the candidate. If I'm selling lots of other opportunities to the candidate and lots of different roles to the candidate, I'm talking about lots of different clients to the candidate, then I can prevent the candidate from going anywhere else in the marketplace. If I'm smart, I will ask the candidate to remove their CV from the job boards, so other agencies can't find that candidate. Therefore, I have an exclusive candidate, which is far better than having a candidate is out with lots of other agencies. My driver with my candidate is twofold. Can I get a candidate with multiple interviews in multiple clients? And can I get more candidates into one client for interviews? So I'm thinking all the time about my client side and my candidate side. If I have my candidate out on multiple interviews, then I've got more opportunity of placing that candidate if I just have him in one place for an interview. So these things are all about the actions that we take when we're doing there. I want to know, can they do the job? Will they do the job? That is the most paramount thing all the way through. So to close and to maintain control, I've got to make sure constantly that I am building a relationship with my candidate. If I build a relationship with my candidate, then they will trust me more, and we will have a far better process through the a far better or far smoother recruitment process than before. So I've got to make sure that I discuss all live roles. I've got to discuss all potential clients with them. I get GDPR consent to market them to clients if required. I tell them what I'm going to do for them. I set their expectations right at the beginning of the interview. I'm now telling them what I'm going to do with all the information that I have. And that's going to set expectations and keep them. I've got to keep my expectations. So if I set the expectation of the candidate, I'm going to do this, this, and this, then I need to do this and this in the timescales that we've prescribed. I then want to set up a call with my candidate to make sure next is what's going to happen. So I'm going to set up a call probably in 2 days' time, saying I'm going to get your CV out and your video out, etc., etc. I'll call you in 2 days' time at this time to give you an update of what's happening. So irrespective whether you've got feedback from your client or not, you still call the candidate because you're setting expectations all the way through. I then start to think about testing the commitment of my candidate. And as soon as I start to test my commitment for my candidate, I know I have the right candidate to move forward. I know when I make my decision at the end of this interview process, whether or not to put this candidate through to the role. So I need to recap all my points with my candidate. I need to close them. If there's anything I missed, I need to go back over it again. I need to email my action plan and commitments to my candidate, including deadlines. By emailing it, it makes it so much more concrete. They have something verbally from us because they've had the verbal confirmation, they've had the verbal discussion in the interview. I'm now going to send something in email. If the candidate's interested, I'm asking them to email me back, and they'll email me back. Often what I find is they email me back with more information because I ask them to go away and think about more information they can give me before I submit the candidate. I'll email you. Can you email me back on that? And they'll come back with more information. And finally, I need to stick to my plan. I have a plan that I've set out for recruitment. I need to stick to this plan, and I need to be able to go through and deliver my plan. Once I've finished the interview and the candidate has either left the video or left the building, so to speak, okay, I now need to make a decision on whether I put that candidate forward or not. If I have a nagging doubt, I go back to the candidate and try and eliminate that doubt. If I still can't eliminate that doubt, and if there is any doubt, I do not put the candidate forward, because I have a real strong feeling that that doubt will manifest itself in a disaster and stop the candidate getting the job, which makes me not look as good as I should do. So I need to make sure that I cover every single point and stick to my plan and deliver my plan back to my candidates. So to conclude, what I'm looking at is very simple. I need to know a telephone pre-screen will prevent me from wasting my time. So if I've got a candidate on a telephone pre-screen that isn't right, then I won't take them to a face-to-face, because that will waste my time. I want to know, can they and will they be able to do my role? I want to build stronger bonds between myself and the candidate constantly, because I want to make sure I have a genuine relationship with my candidate, because having a genuine relationship means that we can be more honest with each other, we can create trust with each other, and therefore I can tell them what's going on, and I can be more honest and brutal with them about how they can prepare better for the job and whether they're going to get the job or not. Also, they find it harder for them to reject an offer if they feel more invested in you. If they feel more invested in you, they will give word of mouth marketing to everybody and anybody they meet about agencies. Because if you're an agency that stands out above the rest, candidates talk about you constantly. I want to make sure that I define my goals and objectives with the candidate and I stick to them. I want to make sure my first impression lasts. I want to make sure that I set up a winning environment for my candidate and for myself. I have everything to hand. I don't have to worry about anything. It's all there in front of me and everything is working perfectly as I expect it to be. I control the interview process. I need to know, as I said, can they and will they be able to do the job? You now know other questions to ask to make sure you're probing more. Tell me more about that. That sounds interesting. Can you expand on that? Any of those questions that lead into them giving you more information is absolutely what we should be doing, rather than just skimming the surface and hope that's enough. We now know how to use STAR. We know the benefits of actually probing data, and we know how to close with actions and how to gain commitment. We need to, as I said, make an informed choice at the end of all this. And by understanding all of this, we can make an informed choice. So interviewing candidates is very straightforward if we do it properly. If you interview a candidate properly, it will take an hour or more. But that hour spent with that candidate means that you can now take that candidate either to the role that you were recruiting them for and market them properly, but it also means that you can market them to other clients. And as I said, the stats are starting to prove categorically that more candidates get offered roles by clients if the candidate has been face-to-face interviewed by the agency beforehand. That now becomes so much easier over video, but I still say you cannot beat face-to-face. However, face-to-face is going to be hard to do for some period of time due to social distancing. So we're going to have to work on video. We'll have to work hard on video, but let's make sure that when we're doing video interviewing, we're not just skimming. We're not just doing the basics and the easy part. We're probing deeply into the candidate to get everything that we need to make sure we make an informed decision. So when we put that candidate into the true recruitment process, CV out or video out, from there on in, your candidate is 100% committed to the process. So that's interviewing candidates face-to-face, or inverted commas, virtually. If you've got any questions, I'm happy to hear any questions. Helen sent some through. You need to identify and match the evidence to raise desire and for interview with the client, spec calls, offer this, absolutely. Sarah just put, even in 2020, we registered candidates who never used an agency, so will always initially, whether they have the understanding or not, work with an agent involved. It can be daunting for them. It can be daunting for them. But what I always think about, if you're putting a candidate through an interview process with yourself, you're preparing them for an interview with the client. You should always make your interview quite thorough and quite in-depth. That's where the candidate is going to expect a quite thorough and in-depth interview with your client. So you're preparing them for that next stage all the way through. So it's important that we invest in our candidate marketplace now and really invest heavily. So at this moment in time where, you know, recruitment is quite light at the moment in certain marketplaces, we should be interviewing more and more candidates and banking these candidates ready for when the market comes back. Getting the interview process right is so important. Has anybody got any more questions or any comments? Okay, so if there's no more questions and no more comments, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. I hope you've enjoyed your hour. It was a very quick hour. There's so much more we can do on interviewing. I'll be doing another course next week, next Wednesday. Please look out for the links on LinkedIn and the adverts out on LinkedIn, and I'll drop emails down to all of you as well, so look out for your emails so you can join next week. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed it. This is Live, Work, Life. Wishing you a safe and happy week, and we look forward to seeing you next week.